Prince Harry has finally released proof that confirm Meghan Markle has 2 children with another man and they're not his biological children. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. To the outside world, the life of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle seemed nothing short of perfect. Images of the couple, radiant and smiling, flooded the media, waving from the steps of Buckingham Palace, walking hand in hand through gardens, attending charity events with an effortless air of sophistication. Their family life, meticulously documented on social media and in countless interviews, appeared idyllic. The prince, often described as charismatic and compassionate, exuded devotion to his wife and children, while Meghan, admired for her elegance and activism, seemed to embody the modern royal ideal. Every public moment painted a picture of harmony, unity, and happiness. Yet, as is often the case with images designed for public consumption, perfection can be a carefully crafted illusion. The perception of their family was more than just a collection of photographs. It was a narrative, a story that the public had embraced wholeheartedly. Harry and Meghan's courtship, marriage, and early years of parenthood were framed as a tale of triumph over adversity. Meghan, a woman of mixed heritage and a former actress navigating the strict and often conservative royal protocols, was seen as a symbol of progress and modernity. Harry, carrying the weight of his family legacy, appeared as the devoted husband and protective father, determined to shield his family from the scrutiny and pressures that had marked his own upbringing. Together, they embodied a fairy tale narrative, a story of love overcoming tradition, adversity, and expectation. Social media amplified this perception. Photos of Meghan and Harry with their children, carefully curated and widely shared, reinforced the image of an ideal family. Birthdays, milestones, and holidays were presented as moments of joy, each frame seemingly untouched by conflict or complexity. Fans around the world reacted with admiration, their comments reflecting a collective longing for the simple, universal story of love and family. On the surface, the world saw smiles, laughter, and closeness. Every detail, matching outfits, affectionate gestures, playful interactions, served to solidify the narrative of unity and parental devotion. For many, it was the kind of family they dreamed of having, the kind that seemed untouchable and enviable. But the illusion of perfection often masks underlying truths. In every family, there are dynamics, tensions, and secrets that remain hidden from public view. For Harry and Meghan, the stakes were exponentially higher because their every move was scrutinized, dissected, and broadcast to millions. Maintaining the appearance of harmony was not merely about presentation. It was about survival in a world that had little tolerance for imperfection. Royalty demands not just adherence to protocol, but also the careful orchestration of image, reputation, and public perception. Every gesture, word, and public appearance became part of a narrative designed to shape how the family was perceived. The pressure to uphold this idealized image could be overwhelming, even suffocating, especially when reality did not always align with what the public expected. From a distance, the couple's life seemed like a perfect blend of modernity and tradition. Their children were portrayed as bright, cheerful, and well-adjusted, participating in family activities that emphasized love, education, and exposure to a wide range of cultural experiences. Photographs captured moments of tenderness, a hand held on a morning walk, laughter shared during a family outing, a quiet moment reading together by a fireplace. These glimpses into domestic life reinforced the notion that Harry and Meghan had successfully created a sanctuary for their family, shielding them from the pressures of royal expectations and media intrusion. To the casual observer, there was no hint of tension, no suggestion of the conflicts that might exist behind closed doors. Yet even within the most carefully constructed illusions, cracks can appear. Certain inconsistencies, however minor they may seem, can accumulate over time to create a sense of unease. For Harry, these moments were subtle at first: an offhand comment, a glance that seemed misplaced, or a detail that did not align with his understanding of family life. At first, these discrepancies were easy to dismiss. After all, in any relationship, misunderstandings occur, and children sometimes act in ways that are puzzling to adults. But for a father attuned to the nuances of his family, the accumulation of small anomalies began to stir unease. Doubt, once introduced, can grow quietly, like a shadow lengthening across a room, imperceptible at first but impossible to ignore once fully present. The couple's public narrative was also carefully reinforced by external voices, media coverage that alternated between praise and fascination, social commentary that idolized their family dynamics, and even members of the royal institution who upheld certain appearances. These external validations, while comforting in some ways, created additional pressure. The more the public embraced the image of a perfect family, the more imperative it became to maintain that image, regardless of what was occurring privately. For Harry, this meant balancing the need to present a unified family while simultaneously grappling with internal suspicions that threatened to upend the carefully constructed narrative. The perception of perfection extended beyond visual representations. Interviews and public statements reinforced the image of happiness and stability. Harry and Meghan spoke about their children with warmth and affection, highlighting milestones and achievements that underscored their devotion. Public appearances were choreographed with precision, giving the impression of ease, connection, and familial unity. Yet for Harry, these moments were increasingly complicated by private questions that he could not share publicly. Every smile and affectionate gesture on display became intertwined with his internal struggle, a tension between appearance and reality that few could comprehend. The very tools used to communicate love and unity, the media, photography, interviews, also became reminders of what he feared might not be entirely true. This tension is not unique to royalty, though the scale and consequences are magnified. In any family, the divergence between public perception and private reality can create profound stress and emotional strain. Secrets, doubts, and unspoken fears exist behind closed doors in households around the world. But when one's life is lived under constant scrutiny, those private moments become high-stakes territory. Harry's journey to uncover the truth about his family would not only challenge his trust and emotions but also force him to navigate a delicate web of public expectation, media scrutiny, and the ethical responsibility of protecting his children. The contrast between public appearance and private reality formed the emotional crucible in which the events of this story would unfold. Ultimately, the perfect family illusion served both as a shield and a source of tension. On one hand, it allowed Harry and Meghan to present a sense of normalcy and stability in a world that rarely affords them privacy. On the other hand, it intensified the impact of suspicion, making the eventual revelation all the more devastating. The audience, drawn into the narrative by admiration and emotional investment, becomes complicit in the illusion, unknowingly shaping expectations and reactions that will come crashing down when the truth is revealed. The tension between public image and private reality is a central thread in this story, highlighting the complexity of human relationships and the profound consequences of trust, doubt, and deception. In this chapter, the stage is set for the unraveling of what appeared to be an ideal family. The images, statements, and appearances that captivated the public serve as both a backdrop and a contrast to the emotional and factual revelations that follow. By establishing the illusion of perfection, the story underscores the stakes involved, the intensity of the emotional journey ahead, and the dramatic tension that drives the narrative. The next chapter will delve into the first whispers and rumors, subtle, often dismissed, yet ultimately critical in the build-up to a revelation that will challenge the world's perception of one of the most scrutinized families in modern history. Even the most carefully constructed illusions have a way of attracting scrutiny. In the case of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, what began as admiration and fascination gradually shifted toward suspicion. Whispers, subtle at first, began to circulate in media circles, social platforms, and private conversations. These were not the loud, sensational headlines that grab immediate attention, but quiet murmurs, small observations, fleeting inconsistencies, and speculative comments that hinted at the possibility that all was not as it seemed. It was in these whispers, often dismissed as mere gossip, that the seeds of doubt began to take root. The whispers took many forms. Tabloids, known for their relentless focus on royal affairs, started publishing stories about inconsistencies in public statements and the timing of certain events. Social media, where speculation can spread like wildfire, amplified these murmurs into trending discussions. Royal watchers and insiders, who have long been attuned to the subtleties of palace life, began to pick up on moments that seemed unusual or out of place. A gesture in a photograph, a comment in an interview, or a delayed announcement could all become fodder for speculation. For many, these were minor details, easily dismissed or rationalized. But for Harry, they began to form a pattern, a constellation of anomalies that demanded attention. One of the most challenging aspects of dealing with whispers and rumors is their inherent ambiguity. They exist in a space between fact and conjecture, truth and fabrication. Some are based on kernels of truth, others on misinterpretations, and many on outright invention. Yet their power lies in the way they shape perception. For someone living at the center of this storm, the difference between a rumor and reality is profoundly significant. Harry, accustomed to intense scrutiny and media distortion, could not ignore the persistent murmurs surrounding his family. Each whisper, no matter how small, carried emotional weight and demanded a response, if only internally. The emotional impact of these whispers cannot be overstated. Imagine living under constant observation, knowing that every action, every word, and every interaction might be interpreted, misinterpreted, or exaggerated. Now imagine that some of these interpretations directly challenge the reality you believe about your own family. The weight of suspicion is compounded by love, loyalty, and the stakes involved. For Harry, the potential implications of the rumors were devastating. They touched the most intimate and sacred parts of his life: his children, his spouse, and his own identity as a father. The whispers were not just idle chatter, they were questions that demanded answers, and their persistence began to erode the sense of security he once felt. What makes this chapter of the story particularly compelling is the interplay between private doubt and public speculation. While Harry wrestled with his own uncertainties, the world watched, debated, and formed opinions. The public's fascination with royal life ensured that whispers were amplified, dissected, and transformed into larger narratives. Social media platforms became echo chambers, where speculation was repeated and validated by thousands, sometimes millions, of users. Each tweet, comment, and post added weight to the rumors, creating an environment in which the truth became both urgent and elusive. For Harry, the challenge was not only emotional but strategic: how to navigate a growing wave of suspicion without causing undue harm to his family or to the children he loved. The origins of these whispers were varied. Some came from former acquaintances, whose observations were framed as insider knowledge. Others emerged from journalists, who relied on unnamed sources and investigative speculation to craft stories that would attract attention. Certain royal commentators, known for their influence over public perception, weighed in with analyses that blended fact, interpretation, and conjecture. Even within the palace, subtle comments and behaviors were interpreted through a lens of suspicion, adding to the complex web of whispers that surrounded the family. Each source contributed a different layer of narrative, creating a multifaceted tapestry of uncertainty that was difficult to unravel. Rumors also have a way of self-perpetuating. Once a narrative takes hold, it is reinforced by confirmation bias. People tend to notice and emphasize details that support what they already believe while ignoring those that contradict it. In the case of Harry and Meghan, small inconsistencies or unusual occurrences were magnified and interpreted as evidence of something larger. What may have been minor lapses or coincidences became signs of deception or hidden truths. The emotional toll of this amplification cannot be understated. For Harry, each new story, each new online discussion, reinforced the sense that something was amiss, even as he struggled to separate fact from speculation. The whispers were not limited to questions of public image or behavior, they began to touch on deeply personal aspects of family life. Questions about the children, once considered unthinkable in polite discourse, began to surface. Speculation about their paternity, though unconfirmed and highly sensitive, started to circulate in certain media outlets and online forums. For Harry, this represented the ultimate challenge: the very foundation of his family, his role as a father, and the trust he had placed in Meghan were now subject to public debate. The emotional stakes had shifted from concern over appearances to concern over the most intimate and sacred elements of his life. It is in moments like these that doubt becomes a living, breathing force. Harry's internal struggle was intensified by the love he felt for his children and the loyalty he felt toward his spouse. He was caught between protecting the innocence of his family and confronting questions that, if ignored, could fester and grow. The whispers became a mirror, reflecting both his fears and the potential realities he had yet to face. Each passing day, each new rumor, added to the tension, creating an environment in which the line between perception and reality grew increasingly blurred. What is remarkable about this stage of the story is the way it highlights the universality of doubt and suspicion. While the stakes for Harry were extraordinary due to his public life, the emotional experience is one that many can relate to. In any relationship, small inconsistencies or unexplained behaviors can generate questions and unease. The difference lies in the scale, scrutiny, and consequences. For Harry, the whispers were magnified by global attention, turning private concern into a public spectacle. The emotional intensity was compounded by the knowledge that any action or inaction could have far-reaching consequences, not just for him but for the entire family. By exploring these early signs of doubt and the emergence of whispers, the story begins to build a foundation for the revelations that follow. It establishes the tension between public perception and private reality, highlights the emotional complexity of navigating suspicion, and sets the stage for the investigative journey that Harry would ultimately undertake. The whispers, subtle though they were, planted the seeds of the questions that would later demand answers, and they underscore the fragility of trust in even the most seemingly perfect circumstances. As we move forward, the story will delve into Harry's growing suspicions, his internal struggle, and the steps he took to seek clarity. The whispers and rumors, once dismissed as minor, are revealed to be the early signals of a truth that would shake the foundations of the family and challenge the world's perception of what it means to be royal, to be a parent, and to be human. The tension is mounting, the stakes are high, and the journey into the heart of the revelation has only just begun. Doubt, once planted, has a way of growing quietly, yet relentlessly. For Prince Harry, the whispers and rumors that had circulated around his family were not something he could simply ignore. At first, they might have seemed distant or inconsequential, a story in a tabloid, a fleeting comment from an acquaintance, a suspicious social media post. But over time, these small, seemingly innocuous signals began to take root, accumulating in his mind like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The illusion of the perfect family, so carefully maintained in public, began to wobble under the weight of private uncertainties. For Harry, the journey from doubt to suspicion was both emotional and intellectual. It was not simply a matter of accepting what the rumors suggested. It was about noticing patterns, discrepancies, and inconsistencies that could no longer be dismissed. Certain comments or gestures from Meghan, once easily rationalized, started to feel off. Timing of events, explanations that lacked clarity, and fleeting observations that didn't align with his understanding of their life together began to accumulate. Each small anomaly, when considered in isolation, might have been trivial. Together, however, they formed a constellation of concern, one that he could not ignore without betraying his own instincts as a father and a husband. Harry's emotional journey during this period was complicated. On one hand, he loved his children deeply, their presence in his life representing the pinnacle of joy and purpose. On the other hand, the possibility that something fundamental about his family could be untrue created a cognitive and emotional dissonance that was hard to reconcile. The tension between love and suspicion is among the most painful human experiences. To suspect a loved one of betrayal, especially when children are involved, is to grapple with questions that strike at the core of identity, loyalty, and personal morality. Every parent hopes for unconditional trust, and every spouse hopes for honesty and transparency. When those foundations are shaken, the emotional repercussions can be profound and enduring. In the early stages, Harry's suspicions were internalized. He questioned himself, his judgment, and even the legitimacy of his concerns. Was he overthinking? Was he being influenced by external pressures, by the tabloids, or by the constant scrutiny of public opinion? These were legitimate questions, and he wrestled with them privately, trying to separate rational concern from emotional reaction. Yet the more he observed, the more he realized that his instincts were not unfounded. Human intuition, especially when informed by emotional connection and lived experience, often detects discrepancies before logic can fully articulate them. Harry began to trust that his feelings were not irrational, that there was a reason behind the growing unease that had taken hold in his heart and mind. The complexity of his situation was heightened by the constant media scrutiny. Every move he made, every private conversation he attempted to have, could potentially be leaked, misrepresented, or twisted into a public story. The paradox of being a royal in the modern era is that privacy is nearly impossible, and yet it is desperately needed for navigating personal crises. For Harry, even the act of processing his suspicions had to be carefully managed. Who could he confide in without risking exposure? How could he seek clarity without triggering a media storm or putting his children at the center of unwanted attention? These questions added layers of tension and emotional weight, making the process of confronting suspicion even more fraught. As his doubts solidified into suspicion, Harry began to observe his family more closely. Small inconsistencies that had once seemed innocuous became significant in the context of his growing concern. The way certain details about the children's behavior, development, or medical history were presented, the timing of announcements, and even subtle shifts in Meghan's demeanor, all of these factors began to demand attention. For an outsider, these might appear trivial, but for a father attuned to the nuances of family life, they represented potential signals of a deeper truth. The process was painstaking, emotionally exhausting, and profoundly isolating. Suspicion has a way of creating a solitary reality, in which one's thoughts, observations, and fears cannot easily be shared without risk of disbelief, judgment, or conflict. This period also marked a shift in Harry's relationship with trust. Trust, once implicit and unquestioned, became something to be scrutinized, measured, and validated. Every interaction, every conversation, became an opportunity to test assumptions and search for clarity. For Harry, this was not an easy process. Trust is the foundation of every relationship, and questioning it is an emotionally destabilizing act. Yet, as his suspicion grew, he realized that ignoring these questions could have consequences far more devastating than confronting them directly. The emotional calculus was clear: better to face the possibility of an uncomfortable truth than to live in